Hey guys, it's Charlie G. Today I'm going to be walking you through the home buying process. It's very complicated, it's time consuming, it's tedious, but I'm going to try to make this as painless as possible and try to detail this in the easiest way as I can. These are some pre-checklist items if you're thinking about it and just haven't actually looked into it. But these are some pre-checklist things that you should know about. First is your credit score. The most loans require 580, but I would suggest you have in the mid 600s or more. The reason why is because it shows that you've been paying some things off. 580, what that means is that you're still in kind of some debt, you owe something. And it's just going to be harder for yourself. You're not going to get the best rate as possible. So the mid 600 is usually good because the banks will be much more lenient and you can get the best rate possible even at the 600s. The next thing is your debt, because you want to pay down as much debt as possible if you can. To start off, credit cards, these are more short term. So start with your short terms, pretty much the smallest debt, and work your way through the largest and pay the smallest owed on any credit card that you have to the largest owed that you have. The next is a car loan. If you have a car loan and you're almost there or you have the cash to do it, I definitely say do it. But if you think it's more of a longer term, meaning it's going to take you more than a year and it's not just a few months to pay it off, yeah, definitely don't worry about that. Next is your student loans. Student loans is long term, so yes, you can pay, but I don't recommend doing that. Of course, you should be paying a decent amount. That's not the minimum, so you're not paying as much interest. But student loan is over the course of X amount of years, depending on the term that you have. So don't worry about it too much. But if you're close to paying it off, yes, knock it out. The next item on the checklist is your budget. It's important that we budget ourselves. If you haven't checked out my series on budgeting, definitely take a look at that. I really try to detail as much as possible and give you some real life case scenarios and some numbers you can play around with. But the budget is very important when it's time for you to go through the home buying process. This is how you budget for the home buying. It's a little different than my regular budgeting topic that I discussed. The reason is because your savings is different, because your home works as a savings for you. So you're not too worried about the savings. So let's first count our expenses, right? Car loan, let's say it's $300. Student loan, $150. Groceries, $400. Electricity, gas, $150. Cell phone, $70. Internet, $70 a month. And your entertainment, streaming services, let's say it's $100 a month. All in total, you're at $1,240 in monthly expenses. We don't factor rent into this because your rent is getting eliminated and being replaced with your mortgage. So you're just counting all your expenses that will follow you after leaving where you're currently renting, where you will be buying. So looking at our case scenario that we've been using, where I'm a single person making $60,000 a year, which is about $3,500 a month that I'm bringing in, minus that $1,240, we're left with $2,260. Does not mean that's how much we want to completely give to our mortgage, because we still need a little bit of gap and leeway minus our expensive to be able to do work on the house in case something happens, and we should still be able to save something. May not be as much, but it should be something. So definitely you should allocate a good percentage. I think is 80%. So if you put 80% of that $2,260 towards what you would be paying towards a mortgage, it's a good number. That's a little over $1,800. The scenario that I explained in my other series was when you're paying rent, which is around like close to $1,600. You should be paying a little bit more in your mortgage because it has so much more benefits. So why not do it? Your rent is pretty much you giving money towards someone else to pay either their mortgage or going into their investments or other things, versus where you're putting that towards your mortgage. You're investing in something that you will eventually own. It's an asset, but you're paying it to completely own it. It's pretty much yours, but you're paying the bank for giving you the money up front to own that, to start that investment. So I know it seems that we're saving less, but there's so much benefits towards purchasing a home. Eventually, you're paying something called a principal. It may not be the interest, but the principal that you put into this home, it actually does not go away. It sticks into the home. And when it's time to sell the home, you'll have all that money back plus more. The last thing on the checklist is you should have at least $10,000 saved up. That's after your down payment, your closing costs, and any other expenses that you had to incur while purchasing the home. And the reason for that is that you need those emergency funds. You don't know what the home consists of. Although the seller might have told you everything is perfect, you did the inspection. The inspection is only a day and it's only for a few hours. You haven't lived there, so you don't know all the things that could have went wrong or is going to be wrong with the home. So it's important that we have at least some cash set aside for these case scenarios. I think it's a good number if you're getting, for this scenario that I'm going to be explaining, anywhere from a home that's worth $200,000 up to maybe $500,000 or even a little bit more. $10,000 is a good number to have just in case something happens. Okay, so you went through this pre-checklist that I just explained and you feel ready. You had the conversation with yourself and you're like, okay, right now is the time. I really want to do this. I really want to do this and have something that I own. So now you're ready. If you're having those conversations with yourself, just go for it. Do not hesitate any longer. Just go for it. You've been able to manage a good budget on a monthly basis. You got it packed down, locked down, and it's been going great for you. Now let's dive into it. We're ready to go with the process. We're ready to start the home buying process. The first thing is your pre-approval. The pre-approval will tell any person that you're trying to buy their home how much you can afford. So the pre-approval just gives you a good budget of what should you be looking for. It gives you a range of you should be looking for homes in these prices or these prices. So you can go to any bank actually. It doesn't matter who you get the pre-approval with because ultimately you can choose any bank that's willing to give you the best interest rate after you've done with the offer process and ready to actually move forward with the home. But for the pre-approval, you could go with any bank and just to see how much you can afford. I mean, I do not recommend going to the well-known branches, the daddies of all banks. So that's like your Chase, your Bank of America. Instead, what I would suggest is see if you can find a broker, a mortgage broker, because what they'll try to do is get you the best rate it's possible. They will always try to hunt for the best rate. They are getting paid in the back end, and there are additional fees of doing that. But to me, what I see is that they cut your interest so much that it makes up for that difference. So definitely try to see if you can work with a mortgage broker who can give you the lowest rate as possible. And you can just get the pre-approval from them in the beginning stages because you want to build a long-term relationship, but at least start speaking with a few. And it's completely fine to get multiple pre-approvals because you want to shop around. You want to ensure that you're working with the right person, with the right bank who's going to give you the best possible deal. So definitely shop around. But you typically, a pre-approval, you just need one because it gives you how much you can afford. But once you're ready to actually do the purchase, then you should shop around with different lenders, mortgage brokers, and see who's willing to give you the best rate as possible. Okay, so now we got our pre-approval from our lender, blah, blah, blah. It's all done and set. If you're looking or not sure the type of home that you want to go for, like a single family versus like a two family, get a pre-approval for both because you want to kind of look at both of these case scenarios and see which one would work for you. But if you're a person that doesn't like to deal with people and you say you just want to live there by yourself, then of course, just stick with the single family. And vice versa, if you're a person that likes to, that wants to handle that extra hassle of having someone, but also an extra rental income, then definitely go with just getting a multifamily pre-approval. Now, the difference between the single family and the multifamily pre-approval is that the bank will pre-approve you for less money for a single family because you're the only one responsible for those payments. Versus a multifamily, they will factor in a bit of that rental income to qualify for more, so you can buy a more expensive home because you'll have more streams of income coming in, and your expenses should be about the same, or to make up the difference of whatever's left over from the mortgage. So now we got our pre-approval. The next step is to find an agent. An agent will be your best buddy because they will be with you throughout the entire process. They are the ones that put in the offer. They're the ones that execute a lot of the initial conversations that goes on between you and the seller. So it's important to find an agent that is willing to work with you and that's out for your best interest. Start with referral from friends or anyone that you know that had experience with someone. It's better to do it that way because at least you know the hassles, the good and bad that person had dealt with. And typically I find that friend referrals of agents from friend referrals typically turn out the same way that it turned out for them. So it's a good idea to start with a friend referral. If you don't have a friend referral, you can reach out to some of these real estate companies out there and see if you can talk with a few people. These are certain kinds of people you should definitely avoid. The fast talkers. Don't try to get anyone that tries to upsell you. They'll tell you, oh, we'll get you a dream home, XYZ. Or anyone that tries to get you to sign some form of paperwork ahead of time, because you should not be binding yourself to any agent in the early stages when they haven't even found you anything. So they should at least find you something. Then when you're putting in an offer, that's when you're kind of exclusive, because at that point they're actually doing work. But if you're in the early stages of just searching, looking around, no, you don't know if that person will actually find you something that's good and what you're looking for and what will work for you. Because remember, this investment is for a long term. So you want to ensure that you're working with somebody that really understands that and not just out there trying to get your money. Should be a hassle-free, no paperwork in the beginning. Until you're ready to put that first offer, you should not be doing any paperwork at all. And you should not be paying the agent either. The agent gets paid after you close on home. They do not get paid ahead of that time, because until a transaction fully happen and executes, they haven't really completed their full scope of work. They should only be paid when they complete their full scope of work. And I get it. You may look for a home with someone and just give up, and they don't make no money and they spend hours, but it is part of their job responsibilities and duties. So definitely ensure you're protecting yourself and not pay any agent that's asking you for money. If they're asking you for money ahead, definitely run away from that person and do not look back at all whatsoever. That is not someone you should be working with. The next person you should be looking for is an attorney. The attorney actually is the one that creates these binding and will help you against the seller's bindings as well, legal bindings. And it's very essential you have a lawyer that is good. That you can get a referral from the agent, because the minute you have an agent that works with you, they're out for your best interest. So if you have a referral from an agent, it's still good. It's not really a conflict of interest, even though if you don't close on the home, they don't get it. But they're most likely not going to get someone that's going to jerk you. But if you want to search to be a bit more comfortable, definitely check out different apps or sites you can use, like Yelp or even Thumbtack as well, because you can see ratings and see how well they've done. You can see reviews, what people wrote about these attorneys, and you can finance their costs at the end as well. Some attorneys would like some of it up front or even all the fees up front, but if that's an attorney that is asking for that, I would suggest do not use an attorney that's asking for fees up front. They are legally obligated to do that, and they can. However, I don't suggest it, because if you don't close on this home, then what happens? Unless they just want a fee and they say they will keep you throughout the process, meaning if you don't close on this one and go to the next one, go to the next one, and it doesn't work out, that fee stays the same. Then that's something I can understand, because then you only pay them one time, and no matter which home you close until that transaction is done, then you don't have to pay them anything additional. And it should be a one-time fee. So it's either you pay them that upfront fee or pay them during the closing, which the bank then cuts them a check. So now you have your whole team. You have your attorney, you have your agent, and you also have at least a bank that you're have a pre-approval with, that you're working with. So now we're ready to search. We're ready to search and get things going. So very excited about it. So let's see, how do we do the search process? One thing you should not do is rely on your agent alone. So don't just sit back and stay home and be like, okay, the agent is gonna find me the perfect home. No, Zillow is available to you. You can even use your city or your state's realty listings to look up homes in the areas that you're looking for. Realtor.com, Zillow.com, Trulia.com, all these sites are also available to you. Use them wisely to find homes, because it can also help your agent. Because if you find a home on there and then you show them what kind of homes you're looking for, it helps them figure out exactly what you need as well. They're more experienced because they do this all the time, but you should try to help them throughout the process as well, because they don't know you. They don't know what kind of home, especially if it's your first home. They don't know exactly what you're actually looking for. So it's important that we also try to help them and find listings as well and forward to them, even if that home is not available, but they have an idea of what we like. Do not call the listings yourself. Even though Zillow has the contact information, it's better that you forward them to your agent and have them reach out, because some sellers, they'll try to claim that they represent you because they spoke directly to you and then they scheduled the listing with you. That should not be the case at all whatsoever. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have a conflict of interest. They're going to try to close as quickly as possible. And they're going to try to get the most money they can out of you as well. So avoid that as much as you can. And it's better you have your own agent rather than deal with a seller's agent, which is called a dual agent, because they represent both you, the buyer, and you, the seller as well. I strongly encourage you to not be stuck to an area that you know or you grew up in. Also try to look a little further out, because it may be very expensive, the area that you know. Like for me in New York, Brooklyn was where I wanted to stay and be. However, prices were ridiculous. Even though I got pre-approved to buy something in Brooklyn, it just was too expensive for me to actually make sense, to make sense for me. Even if I rented 2/3 of the house, I would still be responsible to pay a huge chunk of the amount of the home, as well as plus all the utilities. That did not make sense to me. So I looked into Jersey, and it worked out beautifully, because the payments that I would get for the rental, it actually covered the entire mortgage, not the utilities. The utilities I'm still responsible for, but it covered the entire mortgage. So that is an example where it made sense for me to do that. And it's not too far. I'm able to commute to Brooklyn, to where I wanted to be, pretty easily. Driving wise, like 45 minutes. And if I took public transportation, about an hour 15 or so to get to that area where I really wanted to be. So it wasn't too far off. And it made perfect sense as well. It was very commutable, and it was easy to get around to and from. Okay, so you've now looked at several homes and you got to see them in person. Now, how do you decide, right? First of all, let's decide what should we really lock down to. If it's a single family versus a multifamily, I highly suggest you go for the multifamily. And I'll break down why. For the single family, so let's say I'm able to afford $1,800 a month. If we reverse that, we can get an idea of how much of home value we can afford, which is about $235,000. Even if the bank approves you for more than that, I would say stay in that range. And here is why. Because it really falls onto the $1,800 budget that we set aside for the home. $235,000, it's a $8,225 down payment if we're doing an FHA 3.5% down loan. And here's the breakdown of our monthly payments. You have the P&I, so that's principal and interest. It's at $1,000.78. Taxes, it's $5,000 a year, which is $417 a month. Home insurance, it's at $1,500 a year, which is $125 a month. And lastly, there's something called a private mortgage insurance. If you put less than 20% down on any home, you have to pay this. There's no way around it, because it's government regulated. You just have to pay it. So it's called PMI/private mortgage insurance. It's at 184. These numbers I'm giving is based also on a 4% interest. So your principal and interest amount is if you're buying this home on a 4% interest rate. Now let's look at a multifamily. Remember I said that you can afford more because you have that extra rental income that's coming in. So let's take a look at the multifamily. Let's say we can rent apartments in the area for $1,500, right? That's pretty much what we were paying. So let's say we can get $1,500 for one of our units. We live in one and we're renting out one. The bank will now take 75% of that amount, and that number can vary. I know my bank did that for me. They took 75% of what the rental income for the area was, and they said this is how much additional you can afford. But let's say 75% of $1,500, which is $1,125 a month of rental income you would potentially receive according to the bank, plus the $1,800 that we're able to afford, gives our total to $2,925. So we can actually purchase a home where the mortgage total payments is $2,925. So let's get the breakdown of what that would be. So if we reverse that, it means we can afford a home that's $425,000. That's a big difference from our single family scenario. The down payment will be much larger because it would still be 3.5%, so which is $4,700. It's always better to get a multifamily because when you're retired 30 years from now, you need that income to keep coming in, and having a multifamily allows you to have much more income coming in because you'll no longer be working. You'll be out there traveling the world, living your life, just living good, and you need income to keep coming in, and it's a good way to invest in the long run. So having a multifamily, it may be more hassle in the beginning, but after maybe your first year, things really are okay. So it's definitely something worth looking into, especially with the technology that we have today to be able to screen people properly. You can get some really good tenants that doesn't really affect you that much. Okay, so this is the breakdown of a $425,000 home. P&I, $1,925. Taxes, a little bit more, $6,000 a year, which is $500 a month. Homeowners insurance is also a little bit more. It's at $167 a month. And lastly, we have our PMI, which is a bit more as well, at $353 a month. And all these numbers is also based on a 4% interest rate that you're getting for the home. So all in, you're coming around $2,925 for a home. You're renting for $1,500. That means you're having only to pay $1,425 versus the $1,800 as before. So you see that difference right there? You're able to save more. And if we calculate this correctly, right? Remember when you were paying the $1,600 in rent? Now you're paying less. And this is something that you own as well. So the money's not just going to someone. It's actually kind of going back into your pocket. So it's something to definitely look into at getting a multifamily. There's a lot of upsides to it, a lot of benefits. It comes with a bit more work, but it's a good benefit in the longer run. So now we have decided that of the home that we want, whether it's a single or multifamily, we've looked at a whole bunch of homes, we've decided, and we said we're going with this one. Now we're ready to put in an offer. So your agent will most likely draft an offer for you. Depending on the state, that may be a simple email communication, or that can actually be a lengthy amount of paperwork. Like in New Jersey, it's a lengthy set of paperwork that everyone has to do just to put in an offer. Do not be fearful at that point. Just go through it. Just keep moving forward. Do not be afraid of the process. Just keep moving forward at that point. So now we put in this offer, bam. So let's say the seller accepted the offer, or even if they countered, you went on some back and forths, and then eventually they accepted. So now we're ready to rock and roll. We have to schedule our inspection. So these inspections pretty much try to tell you what is wrong with the home, so you're not just buying something blind by it and just going into it, such an investment, and then there's a lot of risk involved. So you want to know what those risks are. So that's what the inspection tries to tell you. Even though it's only for a few hours, you're not actually living there, you don't get to experience what life is like in there, but it gives you some ideas. And inspectors are pretty trained very well, so they'll notice a lot of things and they'll catch a lot of things even us regular folks would not be able to see ahead of time. The general inspector is someone you will definitely need. They will scope out the house from corners to corners and check as much things as possible. They're very experienced and licensed, and ensure you get someone that's insured as well. But they will do a majority of the inspection. The next inspector you want to get is for termites. There is so much horror stories regarding termites because they're eating the beams of the home, and then the home just falls down. I don't know if you ever seen that episode on Family Matters where there was these dust mice just eating part of the wood that Steve let loose, and then the whole floor just collapsed. So that's what can happen. These are very costly because if your beams get chewed up, replacing these things is very expensive. Even though your insurance can cover it, it will increase your insurance cost. So it's best that you kind of see what is going wrong with the home in the beginning and see all those problems. So try to have the seller fix those things as quickly as possible so it's not as costly or burdensome to you. The next inspector you want to get is a sewage inspector. So pretty much they stick up a mic through the sewage pipe to see if there's any cracks or anything going on. Because these pipes are underground, under concrete, it can get very costly to replace. So that's why I highly suggest you do that and try to see how quickly you can get to the sewage line. I remember there's this one home I looked at. It was at least 100 feet to get to the main line, to the main sewage line that connects to the city. That's so long. And to replace that sewage line, it would have cost me $50,000. And good thing I did that because it was busted in a couple places. And these were not small busts. These were like very large. So imagine if your pipe get busted and you start having buildup and backup, and it starts seeping through these cracks and goes outside. You're eventually going to have to replace it. So it's really, you have to ensure that your sewage is pretty good. Another horror story. I have a friend of mine who had a tree branch from the city that was growing back into the home, and it bust open the sewage pipe and it caused so much damage. He had to replace it. And he got fined so much by the city because it created a crack that created so much damage. It just became so costly and a nightmare. So you want to avoid that. Definitely try to get a sewage inspection if you can. The last person I would say to get is someone that does oil tank sweeps. And that's only if you're in an area that you know had a lot of oil tanks. But if the seller has paperwork that they got that removed, do not do it. Just take their word for it until they can execute that paperwork. Don't even do it. Your attorney is going to be pretty good at ensuring that you get that paperwork properly. And if they can't generate that, then negotiations have to start over and you actually have to get that inspection done because they couldn't actually produce that proof that they actually got that work done. So bam, inspections are done. You found issues with the house. It's time to negotiate now. Rule of thumb is anything you can do over time in the long run, try to allow yourself 50% buffer. Meaning, if you know this a repair for the home is $10,000, but it can be done over time, be willing to take $5,000 as credit from the seller or $5,000 in reduction cost of the home from the seller. Because it's something you can do over time. And I always say take the credit because you get the cash. And whether you do it or not, it's really up to you. It's always good to have as much cash as possible, as I always explain. Doesn't mean you have to do the work right away. You can do it whenever you want. But be willing to do a 50-50. And most sellers can give you credit for maybe up to $20,000. It really doesn't go any higher than that. So if you find a home that has more than $20,000 worth of work and the seller is not willing to bend, I would say move on because it's not worth the headache. And this has to be work that you have to get done right away, not work that can be done over time. Like the sewage pipe, like I was explaining, if that was busted, if you had pipes that were leaking completely, and all these damages, you had to break walls and stuff, would have cost you more than that $20,000, I would say don't do it. This is not the home for you. Keep looking elsewhere. You will find one where you will not have as much expense, cost, and headache as well. So just keep looking, and don't be discouraged as well. This is all part of the process. You may not get the first one, you may not get the second one, but do not be discouraged. Just keep going. You will eventually get what you want, and it may have cost you a bit of inspection fees, but do not be discouraged. If you have to save an extra month or 2 months, by the time you get to the offer stage and when you have to actually send the lawyer of the seller that deposit, it's gonna be some time. So it's okay. If you need a month to save, do that, and then go back on the house hunt looking again. But do not give up, don't quit, just keep moving forward. FHA protects you as well. So if there are damages in the home that makes the home not livable, you will not be able to close on it, because they will have someone come in. It's called the appraiser, and if they find all these things, issues wrong with the home, they will not appraise the value of the home, and you will not get approved for the loan. The bank also receives a copy of this inspection report. If it has termite damage, they will not move forward. You will not be able to get that loan, so it's a good source of protection. So it's important that we also not be so fearful, because the bank will not try to give you a loan on something they think you cannot pay, or will be so much of a burden to you, or even something bad happens, they're not going to be able to get their return on investment. So it's important you just keep moving forward. Do not let that distract you or bring any negative influence towards you at all. Okay, so now we got through all these stages. Now we're getting closer to the end. So that is your closing. It's important that we finance as much as possible of the home. Do not try to come with cash for closing. If you can finance it, finance it. And that's your attorney's fees, all the bank fees, your agent fees. Just try to finance everything as much as possible, because it's better that you have cash available to do some repairs or any emergency reasons that you need the cash, that you have it. Depending on the state or even the loan type, I believe FHA lets you finance up to 6%, 5 or 6% of the home value. So on the 420 something thousand, that will be about 20,000 in closing costs that you can finance. On the 200 something thousand dollar home, that's about 10 grand. So depending on your state, that fee will range if you have to pay taxes or not. Another trick I'm going to tell you is you can also borrow from your 401k. I did explain 401k, HRA, what all these things means and why it's important to have it. And here's another reason why it's important to have it. Because that 401k is like a bank that you can loan from different times, periods, as you please. Right? So that 401k you can actually use for your down payment. That is exactly what I did. So I only needed to come up with maybe another $2,000 in cash for my down payment. My down payment was about $21,000 or $22,000. So I was able to borrow $20,000 from my 401k, which is half of what I had. They only let you borrow up to half, and then the rest I came up with. So I had the most amount of cash I needed, which I believe at the time was like 15 grand I had saved up in case I needed to do expenses. And best believe that helped out so much, because as soon as I moved in, I had all these expenses that I did not expect. Until you actually live in the home, you do not see what's wrong with it. So it's important that we have cash available. And the loan that you take from your 401k, although it's an additional payment, we still had a bit of buffer. So we do not have to reduce the $1,800 budget that we have set aside if it's a single family, or even the $2,925 for the multifamily that we had. That number stays the same no matter what. Because when you buy a home, you can play with your savings, because the home is also in savings. So it's not money actually being wasted at all. So it's okay if you have less of an actual savings in cash, but it's being put towards paying the home, because it's a long-term savings account. Just to give you a case scenario of what it's like borrowing from your 401k. So let's say we try to borrow $30,000. Let's say we have $30,000 in our 401k and we need half, which is $15,000, right, to cover our down payment for that $435,000 home. Let's say we needed $15,000 to cover the down payment of the $14,700. So let's say we took half of our 401k, which is $15,000. that payment would be about $250 a month across 6 years. That's including the interest. So it's definitely well worth it, right? You're paying an additional $250. It may be a $250 that's going out of our savings, but we have that cash. And remember, when you pay back to your 401k, it's still your money. It's another bank that you own, that you have. So it's still an investment, and it continues to grow and grow. So there's no reason why to not borrow from it if you have an expense like a home purchase where you actually need that money and you need the cash to do repairs or do some upgrade, buy some furniture, things like that. As soon as you move a home, you'll have these expenses. So it's important that you pull out of your 401k. Remember, it's a loan. You're not doing a withdrawal. You're doing a loan because you still have to pay it back. But after 6 years, that money is paid back. It's back. Plus, it's going to grow as well with the market, all these things. It's definitely well worth it. If you're trying to buy that multifamily and you see you only had $10,000 in your bank account and you had $30,000 in your 401k, you are ready. Just go forth with it. You have $10,000, and that's just a rough number. You're around the range. Yes, you'll have little expenses where it may fall to $9,000. It doesn't matter. You're still within range. And if your 401k had less than $30,000, maybe $25,000, you can still take half of that. These numbers I'm crunching in are just examples that for someone who has a $60,000 income, bringing in $3,500 and trying to purchase a single family at $235,000 or a multifamily at $420,000. These numbers is going to fluctuate. It doesn't have to be perfectly exact. There's no perfect equation for doing this. So just know that these are ranges. Okay, so now we're at that final stage. We're at that closing, and then everybody gets paid. You hashed it all out with the seller. The attorney does the final draft of the closing paperwork. Now you head on to closing. It's going to be a long process. It might take like 2 hours, hour and a half. It's a lot of paperwork, but do not fear or don't be afraid of it. It's an investment that is well worth it. I just got to tell you, congratulations. You have what it takes to purchase and make that long-term investment, because buying a home serves you so much purpose. This is the best investment that you can do or even start with. And here are 4 reasons why. It's a shelter you can sleep in. You can do everything you want in there. It provides you a place to lay your head. It's a savings account. Any money you put towards fixing things, your payment, your mortgage payment that you're putting, the principal that's paid on that mortgage payment, it goes somewhere that's never lost. It's also an investment account. Your home value appreciates over time. So that money that you're paying towards the principal, it actually grows. It's similar to my other video where I explained how investment works over time and grows with compound interest. Your home does the same thing. It just grows at a market value. So it may not be that 7%, and some years it may be higher than others, but it always grows. Your home always appreciates. It never depreciates. The minute you get in there, your home value starts appreciating. So do not think no money's ever wasted. And also, you're collecting rent as well. So it's another form of investment, because in the long run, once your mortgage is done being paid, you'll have that income just keep coming in. So it's good to have that. The last thing, as I explained, you're gonna have fixes and repairs that you have to do for the home and all these management things you have to do for the home. But guess what? It's a tax write-off. All these things are tax write-off. So it's a way to reduce your taxes. So when you had your apartment and you were doing all these things, fixing things, you couldn't do that. But now you can. You can write off everything, especially if you're renting out the home. The more stuff you can rent out, the more stuff you're able to deduct, because you're using that home as kind of a source of business where you have to make repairs for that apartment, etc. Any home repairs you do, just document it. You can write it off. And if you're not writing it off right away for that particular tax year, it gets written off when you try to sell the home. So it's important to document everything, every expense that you have. I will have more information in terms of doing taxes as a homeowner, all these expenses, and how do you manage all these things in future series. So definitely please subscribe if you haven't done so already. I would like to know what you think about my experiences that I've shared with you, and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts, and if there's anything that you would like me to discuss, definitely feel free to share it. And I would love to know your experience as well as being a homeowner, or if you're in the process of looking, please definitely share. I would love to know more about it. And if there's any way we can continue to encourage each other, let's do it. So please stay tuned until next time, and peace.